Where's that roast beef?
Don't ask me this anymore, Modell. Yes.
You gonna finish that?
Yeah, I'm gonna finish it. I paid for it. I'm not gonna give it to you. No.
If you're not gonna finish it, I would eat it. But if you're gonna eat it, you're gonna...
What do you want? Say the words.
No, go ahead. You're gonna eat it. You eat it. That's all right.
Say the words. I want the roast beef sandwich. Say the words, and I'll give you a piece.
Would you guys cut this out? I mean, every time.
Well, if he doesn't talk, he just...
Well, you know what he means, right?
Yeah, I know what he means, but he beats around the bush. He beats around the bush. If he'd say the words, I'd give him a piece.
If I wanted it, wouldn't I ask you? No,
then ask. You know you
just let it go.
You know he wants
You're
it.
annoying.
I'm annoying. I'm trying to eat a meal by myself.
If you want to give him the sandwich, give him the sandwich. If you don't want to give him the sandwich, don't.
I don't want to give him the...
Well, then just eat the sandwich
then
and shut up.
Well, look at his eyes.
I ask one simple question, you get it. You know what your problem is? You don't chew your food. That's why you get so irritable. It lumps. You have, like, roast beef in your heart that just stays there.
Oh, Modell, you're really, really getting me mad now. My blood is boiling.
See, I don't like it.
I'll take the sandwich.
No,
okay?
don't.
Fine, I'll take the sandwich.
See what you do every time.
What are you blaming me? You took this sandwich. I'm sitting, I'm having a cup of coffee. That's it.
No.
You want this?
I don't want it.
Fine, I do.
I can't believe you're eating this. You know, you two play against me. That's what the problem is. You're both on each other's side.
Well, hello and welcome to Vintage Pop. I'm your host, Greg May, and if you aren't used to hearing my voice, well, that's because I haven't done a show in, 3 or 4 weeks, and it feels weird. Doesn't feel weird to be back. It just feels weird that I wasn't in a rhythm or routine, I guess is the word that I was looking for. And then, I don't really have an excuse for you other than the fact that... coursework and classwork has been getting kind of out of hand, and just the general day-to-day of life, and it's just sometimes it's hard to keep up. We'll get back into that in a little while. But, if this is your first time listening, Vintage Pop is a podcast hosted by me, Greg May. The show is dedicated to bringing you the stuff you missed from yesterday from someone who was not there for it the first time around, and I hope that it is a fun and informative look into the pop culture of yesterday. Movies, books, music, and TV will be talked about from all eras, and if this is your first time listening to it, you can see from the trend of the 7 episodes, this now being episode 8. And for the people that I still see that are downloading the episodes over the course of my absence, thank you, because I guess either you're new or you just haven't gotten to it yet. Either way, I appreciate the downloads, and I'm glad you're here. Welcome to the conversation. So, we talk about all kinds of things here. Primarily, it's focused on movies, but we've been known to talk about books. I mentioned lots of books that you can check out, television shows, music albums, all kinds of things. So we'll get right into the show topic for this week, but I want to get my contact info out of the way. So if you would like to email us ever, if you want to talk to me about something, if you want to complain that I don't come out with shows frequently, or you want to suggest a show topic, well, you can email me at vintagepopcast@gmail.com. It's vintagepopcast@gmail.com, or you can tweet or direct message me at Twitter, and that's at vintagepopcast. We also do a lot of show notes on the show, so you definitely want to check out the show notes, because that's where you can check out some of the movies that we're talking about so you can rent them. That's also where you can check out some of these books that I'm talking about, and also upcoming events that are going on. And we do have a few upcoming events that we'll talk about. We also need to talk about that Suspiria screening, because it's been some time since we've last talked, and when I was talking to you about these events that were coming up, Suspiria had not occurred yet, but Suspiria did take place either a week or two ago. I went with my friend Kevin, my other friend Dom, and my friend Liz, and we went and saw the 35mm print of Suspiria at the International House in Philadelphia, and a nice surprise, Jessica Harper was actually there in person doing a Q&A, so we'll get into that later as well. But today's topic, I'm going all over the place. We haven't even gotten through the contact info yet. So, like I said, all the notes that we're talking about, the best way to check out the notes, you do get them if you download the show through iTunes. It'll show up on your phone. But the best way, if you don't, is vintagepop-podcast@blogspot.com. Again, it's vintagepop-podcast.blogspot.com. And that's the best way that you can check out the show notes, so that you can go and do research later on some of the things or products or movies. And all hyperlinks, you just click them, it'll take you right to it. We're also on Podbean if you prefer to listen to us there, and Stitcher. Also, I always talk about this, the Amazon search bar that is on the blog page really would help the show out. I actually have not even checked it, so if you have used it, thanks. If not, please use it. What you need to do is access the website, vintagepop-podcast.blogspot.com. On the right, you will see an Amazon search bar. You can use that for your shopping, and anything that you purchase through using the search bar, I get a little bit of a kickback for it. So it helps with renting movies for the podcast, for doing research. It helps with, if I can't rent it, purchasing it, whether that be on VHS or DVD or Laserdisc or anything. And also just kind of general upkeep, keeping the lights on as far as the web hosting and stuff like that. So any little bit helps. I mean, I think I'd like to start a Patreon at some point, but I don't know. I mean, this is more or less a hobby, and that is kind of why we've had difficulty catching up with the show. I've had about a 4-week break. It's felt like it's been 4 years, so it's good to be back. I'll tell you what we're going to get into. We're going to do 2 movies tonight, that being Diner and Mean Streets. I'm not sure what order we'll get into, but we're going to talk about one of those when we come back. Mean Streets done by Martin Scorsese, Diner done by Barry Levinson, and both have about a 10-year difference from one another. I think Mean Streets came out in 1973. Diner came out in 1982. And I thought they both related to each other because they both have this general theme of kids from the neighborhood, or not exactly kids, but young men from a neighborhood. You know, Mean Streets kind of takes place in Little Italy and the small group of individuals that are involved in a slice of life of that, whereas Diner deals with a group of guys that are basically college age, young adults, and kind of the things that they're dealing with and trying to transition into being adults and what that life is going to be like. And I think both movies, Diner maybe more than Mean Streets, because Mean Streets kind of has an organized crime backdrop, but Diner definitely is very relatable, and we'll get into it later, but it's a fantastic movie. And we'll talk about both of them. Maybe we'll talk about Diner first, because I actually just watched that again, and it's kind of fresh in my mind. Mean Streets I've seen so many times that we can just talk about it. So we'll jump off. When we jump off to our first break, we'll come back. We'll talk about Diner. Then we'll talk about Mean Streets. And then we'll talk about some upcoming events, because there are some secret cinema events. One of them actually got canceled from when we last talked. I think that was one at the... not the Fleischer Art Memorial. That's where the next one's going to be. I can't think of where the last one was. Well, you know, it does not really matter because it got canceled. But in any event, we'll talk about some of the secret cinema events that are coming up. I'll tell you what's been going on as far as myself collecting and whatnot, and anything else that pops up again along the way. So again, I apologize for the break. And I think another thing that comes into the play when you're doing these shows is you want to talk about something that you can talk about at length for. I don't want to just try and force something to do on this show that you're going to listen to and later on find that maybe it seems like I did not take a lot of effort or time into preparing something, because I really do. If you haven't seen some of these films or books or television shows or whatever we speak about on this show, I think it's my duty, and the reason why I created this platform is to inform you and talk to you about these things so that you can go out and seek out and maybe see something new and consume something new, whether that's a book or a new song or a television show or a movie that you might not have traditionally was on the lookout for. So, like I said, we'll take our first break. When we come back, we'll talk about Diner, and we'll get right into it right here on Vintage Pop.
Show starts in 7 minutes.
That's the opening whistle, and our game begins with it. You're still playing for a 30-point bonus question. Here's another toss-up in English. Are you ready? A spaceship is stranded on the planet Mercury outside of the libration areas. It is night and pitch black outside. For 10 points, how long must the explorers wait until sunrise?
Sun doesn't rise on Mercury.
Bremar Stebbins.
They won't get a sunrise because Mercury has one side perpetually turned towards the sun and the other side awaiting the sun.
That's right. They would have to wait forever. That's the answer. I have a 20-point bonus coming up. Here's your toss-up for 10 points. What would a man probably have if he had a visible contusion near the upper part of his zygomatic arch?
Black eye.
A sharp lump on his head.
No.
Black eye, you bozo.
Bryn Mawr Stebbins.
I think he would have a bump here.
You look like you got a bump on your head. A
No,
black eye.
He knows where the zygomatic arch. All right. If we were looking for a black eye, but I must accept a bruised cheek.
Many a tear has to fall, but it's all in the game. All in the wonderful game. Let me know.
All right, welcome back to Vintage Pop. I'm your host, Greg May, and as we said, I didn't know what order I was going to go in, but then I finally decided. We're going to start with Diner here for our first film of the evening, and Diner is a film that came out in 1982, directed by Barry Levinson, and we'll get into it, but it has a lot to do about a circle of male friends that are in their early 20s, kind of college age. They're reuniting for a wedding for one of the friends in their group, and the title refers to their late-night hangout, which is the Hilltop Diner, which is in Baltimore. So the Baltimore is the whole backdrop of the movie, and apparently it was a semi-autobiographical film, and what they say is that it explores the changing relationships among these friends as they become adults through what is mostly a series of vignettes rather than a traditional narrative. And you know, now that I think about that, now that the movie's fresh in my head that I just watched it, is it is kind of more or less vignettes, because sometimes you'll see well, let's get into who's in it before I start breaking it down. So it stars Steve Guttenberg, Daniel Stern, Mickey Rourke, Kevin Bacon, Tim Daly, Paul Reiser, and it is quite an ensemble cast. Ellen Barkin as well. Barry Levinson, who you might also recognize, is director of Good Morning Vietnam, Rain Man, Bugsy, Toys, which he probably wouldn't want you to talk about that so much, Wag the Dog. He has a executive producer credit on Donnie Brasco, and tons of other stuff you can check out on the IMDb page and whatnot. Produced by Jerry Weintraub. It's another early production for him. I know another early production for him as well 2 years prior was Cruising, and I don't know if we'll ever get into that one, the William Friedkin film from 1980 starring Al Pacino. But so anyway, yeah, basically the premise of this film is that it starts at an old... the whole movie takes place in the 50s. And it starts off at this school dance where you're first introduced to Mickey Rourke's character, Boogie, and Kevin Bacon's character, Fenwick, who basically sold his date to somebody else at a dance for $5, and Mickey Rourke kind of goes to talk him down because he's in the basement punching windows out. You'll find out that like Kevin Bacon is kind of, his character Fenwick is kind of like this crazy guy, but he's really, really smart too, as you'll see later on in the movie. And so after this dance, they all drive off, and the guys, Steve Guttenberg's character, Eddie, Daniel Stern's character, Shrevey, Mickey Rourke's character, Boogie, Bacon's character, Fenwick, and Paul Reiser, Modell, they all go to the diner, which is their usual hangout on a daily basis, where they stay all night. And I think, to me, this is where the movie, this is my favorite part of the movie, because you see stuff like this in Quentin Tarantino movies, you see stuff like this in Martin Scorsese movies. It's this close attention to detail on dialogue. And I think the dialogue is written very well. And I think what I read earlier about, there's not like a full traditional narrative. There are a series of vignettes, but the main narrative of this film is that Eddie is getting married. Tim Daly's character, Billy, is coming home to be Eddie's best man in the wedding. And basically, at this point, you see all these events that are leading up to the eventual wedding at the end of the film. So there's a series of side plots between Ellen Barkin, who is Daniel Stern's Shrevey, his wife in the film. They are the married couple, and you can tell that they're having some type of issues, and maybe that they were having a great relationship when they were in high school, but now as they're turning into adults, they're not sure whether or not maybe marriage wasn't the greatest idea, or maybe they weren't. They don't have as many things in common as they might have thought that they were, which I think is a struggle with a lot of young people that probably get married, and they they graduate high school. You see tons of people that have high school sweethearts, and then they wind up breaking up or moving on years later. So yeah. Another side plot of the film is Mickey Rourke's character, Boogie, who winds up getting into debt due to gambling to some, I guess what you would call a local bookie or a loan shark. And he's trying to raise the money back. And he's in law school, and he works at a beauty salon, and he doesn't exactly... and it doesn't seem like he exactly likes it. But there's this, going back to this diner where, I mean, most of these scenes where the movie really shines are in this diner where it's just normal conversations. I mean, I go to a bar once a week, if not more, 1984 in Wilmington, Delaware. And we kind of have that same vibe. It's just an ensemble group of guys that are sitting around talking about everyday life and just dealing with the daily problems that they have to deal with. And I think that's really where the movie shines, because I think especially for young men, I think the movie's very relatable. Maybe whether you're a young man and you're just starting to experience this type of stuff for yourself, or that you're an older guy and you want to reflect on these type of things that happened to you when you were in your youth. And I think the 50s backdrop is great. And another thing that I think is so relatable to our later film, Mean Streets, is the music. And the music, the soundtrack. Let me see if I can pull up the soundtrack for Diner, because I've been looking for it. You can find Spotify playlists and whatnot, but it just really kind of does not do it justice, honestly. So just like I told you, the movie takes place in 1959. So you got Jerry Lee Lewis, whole lot of shaking going on. Bobby Darin, Beyond the Sea, theme from A Summer Place, which has been covered time and time again. It's All in the Game, Tommy Edwards, which is most relatable to me, and not relatable as, and maybe relatable is not the right word, but I think that's the one that sticks in my head the most out of all the songs. It's a great song. I'll try and remember to put it into the beginning of our transition into this segment. I always like to play a little piece of music after I play something from a scene or something that has to do with the movie. So another side plot, I keep getting into these side plots because there's a major, each characters tend to have their own side plots. You have Steve Guttenberg's character Eddie, who's getting married, and his big side plot is that his wife-to-be has to pass this sports test. And if she doesn't pass the sports test, well, then they're not going to get married. We talked about Boogie's character, the Mickey Rourke role, about how he's in debt with some local bookies. Tim Daly's character, Billy, who comes home to be the best man in Eddie's wedding, his side plot is that he has a girl at home that was his friend for years, and after a one-night stand that they had in New York, she is now pregnant. So now they're facing with the idea of whether they should get married, and that she doesn't want to marry him, but he wants to. And there's a struggle between these two characters. And each of these vignettes of what's going on, whether it be the way that Eddie is being kind of juvenile and still trying to hang on to his youth by coming up with excuses like quizzing his fiance on sports questions to try and avoid the wedding, or Boogie not knowing what he wants to do with himself, and so he's getting into debt with gambling. Or you have this Tim Daly character, Billy, who has issues going on with his this girl, Barbara, that is pregnant now. And then you have Daniel Stern, Shrevey, and his wife, Ellen Barkin's character, who are having difficulty with their marriage. And I think that's what really, and if I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry, but I think that's the biggest thing, and that's the biggest takeaway from this movie, is that it's so relatable, because everybody knows somebody that has problems like this. And I think that's really where the movie shines, because between the dialogue of just screwing around with your friends, it's just a slice of life and I think that's timeless, because everybody has a friend that has an issue with something, whether it's not exactly the same things that are taking place in this plot, but maybe they're maybe they're slightly relatable, maybe they're not. But the fact is, these times that we have and locations, and everybody probably has a spot that they're a regular at. In my case, it's the bar in Wilmington that we all come to. We all kind of blow off some steam after a crazy day and just kind of talk about life. And we go home and we have to deal with our own little side plots. And once again, I think that's why the movie is really great. So Diner, like I said, wonderful dialogue, great soundtrack. I did talk about how Kevin Bacon's character is kind of, and that's a side plot I might have missed as well. He's kind of like the wild card guy of the group. He likes to mess around and he gets into trouble, but it turns out that he's really smart. And you see this in a scene when he's watching a quiz show where there's some students from Cornell and another Ivy League university being quizzed on television, and he's able to answer all these questions. And you think for the longest time until this point that he's just a kid that's screwing around. And what it turns out is he's a really smart guy. He just doesn't know what to do with himself. And that's another thing that a lot of young people, they just don't know what to do with themselves. You get to a point and they say, hey, you're XYZ age and you need to decide what it is that you're going to do. And I think that's what Kevin Fenwick's character is supposed to represent. And I think that what is done here by Barry Levinson in this film is a wonderful screenplay set to film that covers a lot of things that people deal with on a daily basis. And I think that it's not often and that you get a director that can write and direct a film that seems so relatable to you, because sometimes, especially after the late 70s, some of these films were like these big director pieces, and you had Apocalypse Now with Francis Ford Coppola, and you had some other movies with Sorcerer with William Friedkin, and these magnum opus type movies that we started to get away from. But this is a film, and by no chance, I don't know if I would put Barry Levinson in the same rank as a Spielberg or a Coppola or a Scorsese. Scorsese, for example, later on we're going to be talking about him, his magnum opus, New York, New York. The late 70s was an end of an era for that, and I think that this movie is more relatable to the type of stuff that we see now in movies, but maybe more on the indie side. I guess a movie that I could relate to this would be Adventureland with Jesse Eisenberg, and how he comes home from a semester of college and he starts working at a theme park and he has to deal with all the little intricacies of his life and the people around him. And I think movies like these are really relatable and they work really well. And I don't know, a budget of $5 million, it made $14.1 million in the box office. It's got a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think it's really worth checking out. So if you've never seen it, Barry Levinson's Diner from 1982, Steve Guttenberg, Daniel Stern, Mickey Rourke, Kevin Bacon, Tim Daly, and Ellen Barkin. I think it's a really great film, and I think it's really worth your time to check out. I hope you find it very relatable as well. So we'll take our second break, we'll come back, we'll talk about Mean Streets, and we'll get right into that as well, right here on Vintage Pop.
The following program is a special presentation from Home Box Office.
Mean Streets is about...
You gotta be like me.
Tony.
Just be sure and tell him to be here tonight, all right?
Michael. Giovanni.
Hey, wait a minute.
Johnny.
Tony, you gotta worry about talking about one thing and then zap.
And about Charlie. About Charlie, who played and he laughed.
Prega battiamo donna in un riposa.
Make it louder.
Go ahead, turn on the radio, John. Yeah. We're going to a party. Have lots of fun.
And pray.
I guess you could safely say that things haven't gone so well tonight. But I'm trying, Lord. I'm trying.
And fought. But most of all, he cared.
Tony, be careful.
He cared for his friends.
Oh, what's wrong with you guys? We're friends.
In these mean streets.
All right, is everybody ready?
Yeah!
Okay. All right, now here we go. A one, a two, a one, two, three.
Welcome back to Vintage Pop. I'm your host, Greg May, and for our third segment, we'll be talking about Mean Streets, the 1973 film directed by Martin Scorsese, done on a budget of $500,000, shot almost, I guess, entirely in New York City. It's a crime film, basically. There are some crime things that happen in the film, but a lot of it is just a slice of life, I think, of living in Little Italy in maybe the late 60s, early 70s. It stars Robert De Niro, Harvey Keitel, David Proval, who you might recognize from The Sopranos. He played Richie Aprile, if you watch The Sopranos. Richard Romanus and Cesar Danova. So done by Warner Brothers, and we'll get right into it. Harvey Keitel plays a guy named Charlie. He's a young Italian-American who lives in New York City, Little Italy, and he's constantly going back and forth. You can tell that Charlie has a really good conscience, because even though he's kind of doing these illicit things because he works for his uncle, who is a prominent kind of loan shark and political fixer, a mobbed-up type of guy in Little Italy. And Charlie's also very religious as well. So he has a conscience going back and forth about doing these things, as well as, trying to be a good person. And he's always watching over his younger friend, who's Johnny Boy, who's played by Robert De Niro, who is always in big-time debt from loan sharks. And like Diner, they have a hangout. And that bar is Tony's Bar, which is owned by this guy Tony, who is played by David Proval, who you've seen from The Sopranos. And it's a lot of scenes similar to Diner. All these events that are happening cut in between conversations and stuff that are going on in the bar. So Charlie works for his uncle Giovanni, doing kind of mob-related things, collecting debts and whatnot. At the same time, he's having a secret affair with Johnny Boy's cousin Teresa, who has epilepsy, and she's kind of ostracized because of her condition, especially by Charlie's uncle Giovanni. So he kind of has to keep that a secret, because at this time too, it seems like there's a strong feeling of not disrespecting what your family's wishes are, or trying to, save face or be involved as much as you can with that type of family or maybe neighborhood related type of stuff. This is stuff that happened almost half a century ago, but at the same time, I've never been in that type of family life where you had to worry about things of that regard. So Charlie's torn between being a Catholic, his illicit work for his uncle, and then over the course of the film, Robert De Niro's character, Johnny, increasingly becomes more and more destructive, and disrespectful of the people that he owes money for. And since he can't receive redemption in the church, Charlie takes it upon himself to try and sacrifice himself on Johnny's behalf. And so this all comes to a head where Johnny's owing money to Richard Romanus' character, Michael, who is kind of a big deal in the neighborhood, and he's not paying Michael the money. And I think it's $2,000 that the amount is, and it goes back and forth over the course of the movie, dealing with Johnny Boy owing him money, Charlie trying to buy him more time, and eventually this comes to a head one night when when Charlie convinces Michael that Johnny's going to pay him. So Johnny goes to the bar and he pulls a gun on Michael. This, not to spoil it, but you can kind of see that things don't exactly go well. And even if what you're thinking is probably not true, but it also doesn't go well at all. So, what I will say though is I don't want to break down plots blow by blow, because I feel like that spoils the movie for you. What I want to do is to be able to tell you what I think is great about these movies and why you should see them. And I think why you should see them is because these are both two movies, Mean Streets and Diner, that are kind of relatable, not in the way that, Mean Streets is a slice of life of living in Little Italy and the crime that was going around in the bar in that movie at that time period is of course much different than what's going on in Diner, but I think it does very well with dialogue as well. And Martin Scorsese is great with dialogue, writing scripts. And directing characters who are able to improvise quite a bit as well. And you see a lot of improvisation between Harvey Keitel and Robert De Niro. And again, that's where these movies shine. It's the dialogue. Another thing that's really great about these movies are the music. And the music is done very well in Diner, and the music is done very well in Mean Streets. And the music that's done in Mean Streets, you see, when you watch Mean Streets, you will see the blueprint for every other movie that Scorsese has done that has used music heavily, that being Goodfellas, Casino, The Departed. You see how these scenes flow in and out with one another, and how music takes the imagery and kind of really enthralls you into the shots. All the shots in the bar are great. They're a super dated bar, obviously. The movie taking place late 60s, early 70s. The Rolling Stones are playing, Jerry Vale, things of the like. And just these darkly lit bars with red lights and just this look that you can't get anymore. And I talk about this all the time, about the older style of New York City. You look at it in pictures or movies, and this is a time that was captured on film that you can't experience anymore. So you need to watch these type of movies to be able to experience the type of scenery and imagery that you're going to get in Mean Streets. And the music just works incredibly well with it. And I really recommend you checking out this movie. It might move a little slow for you the first time that you watch it, because it does move at a slower pace than some of Martin Scorsese's other movies. I will say that. The first time I saw it, I was not in love with it. But as time went on, it's now become one of my favorite movies, and a movie that I watch on loop, probably throwing in and out of the VCR a couple times a week just as background noise. That and Taxi Driver, along with it, are just movies that I watch quite often. It gets to the point where, like, when you watch Goodfellas or Casino, and you just know the lines that are coming, they're just ingrained in your brain because you've seen it so many times. And I like to joke every now and then and say, like, movies like this and Goodfellas and Casinos are almost a comedy, not in the fact that they're funny movies or that funny things are happening on screen. It's just we're so, at least in my friend group, so known with the lines and the reading of the way that the lines, whether it be Joe Pesci in Goodfellas and Casino or Robert De Niro and Harvey Keitel in Mean Streets, you just know when the lines are going to come. These are favorite scenes of yours of these movies, and it just comes out in natural conversation, and these movies just become part of your own personal little zeitgeist and your friend groups. And I think that's what really makes Mean Streets stand out. And if you're a big Martin Scorsese fan, then I hope you've probably seen it. And if not, it's definitely something you need to see. And as I said, it might not move as quickly for you as some of the other Martin Scorsese movies that you may have seen, but I will tell you that this is a movie that will grow on you. The imagery, the improvisation between the actors, the script writing and dialogue between all the characters, the lighting and the music all put together. A very great film that is definitely worth watching. We'll take one quick break. We'll come back. I'll tell you what's been going on. We'll talk a little bit about that Suspiria screening, and I'll see if I can get you caught up on some things that are going on locally that you might want to check out right here on Vintage Pop.
Hey, mister, can I trade in this 7-Up for a Sprite?
Gee, I don't know. Something the matter?
Yeah, Sprite tastes better than 7-Up.
Come on.
Really, Sprite even beat 7-Up in a taste test.
I always thought they were the same.
Nah, Sprite's the one with the lemon, and more people chose that great lemon taste. Here, try it.
Kid, you just made a sale.
Okay, so welcome back to Vintage Pop, and I wanted to wrap things up like I usually do and talk about some events that are coming up or things that are going on with me and some events that I've been going to. So we'll get started with the 16mm film stuff. I did not go to Cinesi. And the reason being is because my projector still isn't fixed, and I just did not want to invest money in buying films until the projector's fixed. It's been going on for about a month or so now. I asked the guy the other day. He's an older gentleman, so I didn't want to push him. He kind of said he was going to get to it when he'd get to it, and he's not exactly a young guy, and he's not charging me for it, so I didn't want to really nag too much. So he said we had some nice weather maybe about a week or two ago, and he said that the Saturday we had really nice weather. He put it up on the workbench. He was going to work on it the next day, and then he came outside on Sunday, and he said it was real cold. So Thursday it's going to be 85, so maybe he'll throw it on the workbench. But until then, the 16 millimeter collection for me is on hold. Not to say that I'm not going to go out and watch any type of 16 millimeter screenings, but another reason why that I didn't go last week is because Pinfest is this week, and if you can join me at Pinfest, if you're into pinball, that's really cool. It's a convention that takes place at the Allentown Fairgrounds. It'll be taking place this coming weekend, Friday the 4th and Saturday the 5th. I think it's about $20 a day to come in, but it's definitely worth it. Hundreds, if not 1,000 or more pinball machines there on display and all on free play for you to enjoy. So if pinball isn't something that you get to see often, maybe every once in a while in a bar or so, and if you live in the tri-state area, it's definitely worth coming out and checking out. So some things that have been going on. We went to the Suspiria screening maybe 2 weeks ago at the International House, the Lightbox Film Center in Philadelphia. And it was a 35 millimeter rare Italian print that I think it is the sole, if not one of the sole prints in existence of this film in Italian dubbing. And Jessica Harper, who plays Susie Banyan, the starring role in Suspiria, was there in person. So the print itself was beautiful. The colors were really popping out on the screen. The imagery was great. With the excuse of a couple scratches or grain on the print, I'm telling you, if you don't go out and see movies on 35 millimeter prints, you're doing yourself a disservice. You need to go out and see them, because I know these 4K scans and Blu-rays look great, and some 35 millimeter prints, the scans, the projection of them don't always look that great, or the colors get faded. But I'm telling you, if you can find a really good print of something, you owe it to yourself to go out. And if it's something that you really enjoy, you have to go out and check it out. Now, one thing I will say is that there were some things that I would not attribute to the print's fault, just strictly the venue. Subtitles had to be projected separately on the screen. They did not always sync up with the audio. Sometimes they'd stop altogether. Sometimes you would get rapid fire and you try to keep up with all the lines. But it didn't bother me too much because I was there to see the print. I just wanted to see the visuals, what it looked like, because I do own Suspiria. I've seen Suspiria in the past. And basically, I just wanted to see what the print would look like on the big screen. That being said, I didn't find the screen very big. And this may sound very nitpicky, but I mean, it just didn't seem as immersive as, say, going to the Alamo Drafthouse or the Bryn Mawr Film Institute, where there's a large screen. The Secret Cinema did a thing, they called it Jay Schwartz Presents Decade Cinema, maybe a couple months ago. We talked about in either episode 2 or 3. And that screen is much more immersive. It's a large screen. It's like walking into a Regal or an Alamo Drafthouse or a United Artist, and just a full-size screen that you would see a digital projection film now. And I think that has to do with being much more immersed in the imagery that you're seeing and hearing on the screen. There was also people laughing during the screening and stuff like that. But all in all, I judging from the print alone, I thought it was great. There were some things that could have been improved just with the venue, but I would definitely go again, and there are some upcoming events that we're going to talk about briefly towards the end of the show that you should check out. That being said, Jessica Harper came out after the screening, and she was very, very polite and nice and upbeat, and cracked a few jokes. And some of the questions, sometimes you go to these Q&As and people try and ask these very hyper-focused questions, and she kind of made jokes at those people, and it was kind of cool. And she was a really funny lady, and it was great that she came out. So if you missed that Suspiria screening, hopefully there's another one that'll be coming around. I know it's making the rounds. I think Chicago Film Institute owns that print in particular. So coming up, a few events. We talked about Pinfest, but since we're on the topic of this venue, in June, the Bryn Mawr Film Institute, they're doing a series of Kids of the Black Hole, and it's all Youth Rebellion films. So June 15th at 7 p.m., they'll be showing Out of the Blue, which is directed by Dennis Hopper. I don't know much about that one, but I'll probably go. June 16th, the next day, I'm definitely going to. A movie called Times Square with Tim Curry and a couple other people, two child actors that are in the film. And it has to deal with the punk music era in Times Square in 1980. Another film, Suburbia, is an expose on the LA punk scene during the decline of Western civilization. Penelope Spheris. If you have not seen the decline of Western civilization, at least the third kind of is super depressing, but at least the first two, you definitely have to check it out. This is directed by her as well, so it's definitely worth checking out. That's June 23rd. I don't know if it's a 35 millimeter print or not. Actually, yes, it is. It's a 35 millimeter print from 1983, June 23rd at 5 p.m. And then June 23rd as well, that night at 8 o'clock, they're doing it, so I'll probably be there all day, of course. Double feature, Over the Edge from 1979 and a 35 millimeter print of River's Edge. They'll be playing back-to-back that night, so definitely lots of stuff to do at the International House. Coming up at the Bryn Mawr Film Institute, May 9th, is Girlfriends in 35 millimeter, which is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful film that I saw, directed by Claudia Weil. And Stanley Kubrick said it was one of his favorite films. She directed it in 1979, I believe. And I picked it up just from seeing promos of it on HBO. I have some extra, I have old HBO promos, and it's how I used to get actually inspired to watch new movies, because you don't always get to see movies of that era other than the hits, so it's a way to learn about it. Girlfriends has to do with two friends that live together. One is getting married and the other one is single, so she kind of has to figure out what she's going to do about it. So that's definitely a great film. That's going to take place Wednesday, May 9th at the Bryn Mawr Film Institute. And we cannot forget the Secret Cinema, because there are plenty of great events that are coming up. This week, I can't make it, and I wish I could. At the Bryn Mawr Film Institute, this Thursday at 7:30 is a 1960s spy film called Lightning Bolt, which is going to be shown in 35 millimeter. So if you can check that out, that's going to be at the Bryn Mawr Film Institute this Thursday at 7:30. Coming up at Thursday, May 10th, at the Rotunda, which is in University City, Fashion Undressed, the films of style and beauty. Jay, who runs Secret Cinema, he did a series, a special film program to complement a gallery exposition on the history of women's undergarments, and they did a show on fashion. So this will be Fashion Undressed, films of style and beauty. Some of the shorts that'll be shown are the Costume Designer from 1950, Figure Form from 1954, Girls in Short Dresses from 1966, and The Look of Shangri-La from 1973, to name a few. Wednesday, May 23rd at Johnny Brenda's, Jay from Secret Cinema will be hosting a DJ event, I Belong to the Blank Generation, hard hits and deep cuts from the original punk new wave era from 1976 and 1979. I'm going to try and get the next day off so I can go out that Wednesday for it. Saturday, May 26th, there's a Secret Cinema event that's to be announced. And then Saturday, June 9th at the Fleischer Art Memorial, silent cartoon program spotlight with special guest that will be taking place Saturday, June 9th. So definitely plenty of stuff to do all around. So hopefully, you know, if any of that stuff caught your attention, mark your calendars, take a personal note. I'll try and write a few of these events down in the show notes so you can keep track of them. Again, the best way to keep track of those notes are at vintagepop-podcast.blogspot.com. If you want to email us about anything, as I've said before, vintagepopcast@gmail.com. You can DM me or follow us on Twitter at vintagepopcast, and don't forget to use our Amazon search bar. So it's definitely been a long time since I was able to come back on the microphone and talk to you guys about some things, and I'm glad that I'm back. I'm not sure about the release schedule. I'm going to try and get on some type of bi-weekly thing at the very least. I don't expect one next week just because I'm going to be out of town, but with all these events coming up, we're bound to be talking about some things. So this is Greg saying so long, and thanks for tuning in to Vintage Pop, and we'll talk to you next time. Have a great week.